And we are live. What's up, STS Nation? And welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, where we promise to bring you the best guests in all of true crime. On this live episode, we're going to examine the manslaughter charges being brought against Hollywood star Alec Baldwin for his part in the deadly shooting on the set of Rust. And our best guest lineup here to help break it all down. We start off with a man in what looks like a blue track jacket to me, kind of tough to say. And as a law clerk, attorney Nicholas Hart reviewed pro se criminal appeals to determine if there was a case that the court should review. He clerked for the Honorable Judge James E. Graves on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. During that time, he was struck by the criminal justice process and the lack of access to quality representation, and believes that sending a person to jail, whether an A-list celebrity or not, should be among the most difficult decisions made. But as a society, believes we have created a culture of incarcerations without pause. He gravitates to the most complex cases because that is where he feels like he can make the most impact. The woman on the panel tonight is not just any woman. She is Dr. Tracy Pearson, JD. You heard that right, a doctor with a JD at the end. She brings almost 2 decades of experience defending complex legal matters on behalf of litigants in state and federal court and excels in analyzing problems from multiple perspectives. She's an expert in investigations and post-mortem assessment of investigations in all domains, including workplaces, child welfare, and government. She has appeared on Dr. Phil and a bazillion other high-profile shows and is a regular on John Fugelsang's Tell Me Everything on Sirius XM Progress 127. And the humble man in the blue sport coat is R. Timothy Jansen, the famed criminal defense attorney out of Tallahassee, Florida. He also served 5 years as a federal prosecutor, so we don't mess around. We do bring you the very best. So quick housekeeping notes. Please follow us on Insta, Facebook, Twitter. On Twitter, we're at Podcast STS. Please support me and my lovely mother on Patreon. You can also get a YouTube membership. You can listen to us anywhere you listen to podcasts. And as my 8-year-old daughter says, please hit that subscribe button and the like button. It gets the algorithm chugging. So this is the first episode we have dealt with the just emerging story about these charges being brought against Alec Baldwin. So just to kind of lay it out there, and then we'll get into some questions on this. Please send them our way. Actor Alec Baldwin will be charged with 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter in the fatal shooting of cinematographer Helena Hutchins on the set of the Western movie Rust. First off to Nicholas Hart, who is a native New Yorker out of the Isle de Staten Island, now living and practicing in New Mexico where this happened. Nicholas, are you surprised just by the mere fact that charges are now going to be levied against New Yorker Alec Baldwin?
I'm very surprised. All throughout the past months, every public statement made clear that Alec Baldwin had no idea that there was live ammunition on the set, had no idea that there was live ammunition in the gun, that he was told that the gun was cold. And to now charge someone with homicide, that's what involuntary manslaughter is here in New Mexico, homicide, saying that he was criminally negligent, I was very shocked to hear that.
There's a lot to run through here, but we'll take questions as we go. Just happy to see some questions flowing in now. This one to you, Dr. Pearson, a comment from Online Hangover, which I didn't drink last night, but I still feel like I'm hungover because I've got 3 kids, 8 and under. He will not serve, meaning Alec Baldwin will not serve any jail time because he's Alec Baldwin. Do you agree with that? And is the legal system skewed to help those who are wealthy and have celebrity?
Oh, well, those are two separate questions. I don't think that Alec Baldwin's going to serve any time. I really don't. I think that this case is very weak based on what I know about what was going on that set. When it comes to does the system skew, I think it can. I think implicit bias works with jurors as much as does with judges to affect people's outcomes. And I think that in a situation where you have a celebrity that's liked, that can impact people as well as if the celebrity is disliked. So I do think that it can impact things. But when it comes to this situation, I think that this is a very weak case and frankly, a very stupid case.
We'll get back to that. Stupid. She said stupid. Now, he's not the only one being charged. We've got Armor Hannah Gutierrez will also be charged. And her attorney, a gentleman named Jason Bowles, said a jury is going to find his client not guilty because she has committed no crime. Timothy Jansen, your response, will the armorer serve no time because she's committed no crime, even though she's going to be charged with a crime?
Well, a jury will decide. It appears like she's probably more incompetent than negligent. I think this was her second job. I don't think she had much training. She worked one previous job. Who handled the gun? Who touched the gun after she did? What training did she have? Apparently, there was a lot of problems on the set. Union members were leaving the set because safety issues a couple of days before this incident happened. So her lawyer is going to obviously play her down as the inexperience, lack of money for her to do her job properly.
And you just led us right into this next question here from Gemma Gitta. As an IATSE crew member, which is the union, I guess, that was working on this film set, how does Alec Baldwin's role as executive producer come into play? They are ultimately responsible for hiring and set safety. The union camera crew, as Tim just said, walked off the day before. Nicholas, I'll throw this to you. As far as I know, he's going to be charged as an actor. You can even charge someone as an actor, but also as he's liable as a producer, I believe, as well. Is that how you understand it?
That's what they're alleging. But we don't have any charges. They haven't actually charged him yet. All we have is talk from the district attorney's office. I don't think that his role as an executive producer is going to come into play in the legal aspects of the case. They might they're obviously going to try to make an issue out of it in front of a jury or in front of the fact finders to try to give him more responsibility. But whether or not he committed a crime in this case doesn't change in the way just because he was also an executive producer, because a lot of people have those titles, and what exactly that means for Alec Baldwin on this movie set is unclear. It seems like, at least from what's public, that he didn't have those roles. He didn't have that responsibility and that management.
And Tim, back to you for a minute. I understand he's not going to be summoned to a courtroom. Do you know when he's going to actually be indicted on this, when the charges will be levied? Have you found that out?
No, I haven't found it out, but I think they gave him notice. He'll have the opportunity to appear, which is not abnormal. In a manslaughter case, probably not normal, but being the celebrity is, he probably, I don't know if he lives in New Mexico or if he's even there. They'll probably allow him and his attorneys to appear, put a date on the calendar so we can have the full circus at the courtroom.
Yeah, I've heard that there's not, I know I read it, there's not going to be a perp walk of any type, and he's not physically going to appear, but I don't know when they're actually going to indict him. But Dr. Pearson, back to you from Sunix. I've known personally of 2 children who were accidentally killed by other children who got hold of a gun, and in both cases, the gun owner was charged. How is this case different? Is it?
That's a really awesome question. I am really sorry to hear of that situation. But this situation is different, and here's why. In this situation, the gun was intended to be fake. It was intended to not be a deadly weapon. It was not intended to defend anyone. In the situation that's described in the question, in those situations, the guns are intended to be for self-defense in the home, most likely, weren't kept in the ordinary course of locking them up and securing them. So they're treated I think they should be treated very differently in these circumstances, because we're talking about involuntary manslaughter, and we're talking about, in essence, a negligence standard. And what was the duty of care? What's the duty of care with a fake gun?
Well, I don't think it's a fake gun.
Well,
I think it's a real gun.
It's a fake weapon. It's not designed for the purposes of being a weapon to be used to kill somebody or to defend yourself. It's designed as a prop. So when I say fake gun, I mean prop.
But is it? I don't know this. Is it an actual gun? Tim, is that what you're saying?
It is a real gun that is used in quite a bit of Western movies. It's a 45.
It's broken now, but yes.
It's broken now, but it is a real gun. And I think it is a different scenario from someone negligently taking care of a gun where children get it. And if you don't store it properly, you could be held responsible. This is a little different. I think I disagree with both of the other people here. I think there was a basis for the charges. I think in totality, when you look at everything, how he was given a gun, and I'm not sure his explanation doesn't help him when he said he didn't pull the trigger. The FBI has proved that gun cannot be fired without pulling the trigger.
It's not true.
And he made a mistake speaking. Like most guys, public figures, they always believe they can talk themselves out of being charged, and what they usually do is end up talking themselves into a conviction. Not that he's going to be convicted in this case. I think he's going to work out a plea deal.
Dr. Pearson, you said it's not true that he did not pull the trigger.
No.
Why do you say that?
I want to be clear. The FBI report clearly says that the gun broke before they could complete full testing. So what they know is what the gun did when they did the partial testing. I think it is not because they couldn't complete the full battery of testing, that it didn't prove that it couldn't be done. And additionally, I think that because it's been broken, they're going to deprive Alec Baldwin from being able to perform his own testing on that gun, which is going to prove to be a problem.
Interesting. Nicholas, back to you. This question from Nightwood, but before we get to it, Nightwood's asking, will there be jury consultants if the trial proceeds, which is kind of an interesting question. You're in New Mexico. You're the only one of us that's actually there. People have accused the prosecutor in this case of playing politics. How is politics in the great state of New Mexico? Do you think it's a factor in these impending charges?
I do think it's a factor. The movie industry here is the largest growing industry in New Mexico, which is a state where we do have issues attracting new industry and have very high unemployment rates. I think that this is also happening in a part of the state where safety and accountability for workers is important. And more than that, I think the actions are clear that this is going to be both a legal and a political fight when the district attorney gets, hundreds of thousands of dollars of extra funding from the legislature, hires a political consultant, to be a press advisor just for this one case, brings in a special prosecutor. These are atypical things here in New Mexico. And just because Alec Baldwin is a celebrity doesn't mean that the district attorney's office couldn't do this without making it political. And I do think that politics are playing a huge role in what's happening. In fact, in all of the cases that I've done, I've never had a prosecutor announce charges of one of my clients before they sought them, right? So they're clearly trying to get out into the press, before they start this process.
And I'm glad you brought that up. So the thumbnail for this episode is blindsided by the charges. According to Alec Baldwin's attorney, Luke Nikas, his legal team said that they felt blindsided by the charges. they were not given any indication Baldwin would face criminal charges, and say they learned, and I quote here, learned of the charges in the media. Dr. Pearson, do you buy that?
I think that there's a little puffery going on there. When they had requested, prosecutor's office had requested funding in relation to this case, I think, to conduct at least investigation, to pursue it. So I think that they were aware that there's a possibility here. So I think that they're doing a little spin. But I think that it's very possible that they didn't call and say, hi, we're going to charge your client today, or we're going to announce that we're going to charge your client today. That's certainly a possibility. I mean, that would get out to the press through Alec Baldwin's people first. So I would think that they would want to hit the air first.
And obviously the real victim in all this is Helena Hutchins. She was killed in 2021. It's been almost 2 years for this to all play out. When she was struck and killed by a live round coming from a prop gun, which is debatable, as we've seen already, between Tim and Dr. Pearson. This question, Tim, to you from Bee's Knees. My impression, as I recall, was that Alec Baldwin was one of the group doing target practice on the set with real ammo with the prop rental owner. I cannot independently verify that because I don't know the case that well. But if this is true, would this show kind of a lack of regard for safety? Why would you be doing that on the set of a movie, and how would that help the state potentially, Tim?
Well, if that is a true factor and they have witnesses that can testify, then it might increase the liability of Baldwin, knowing that they had real rounds, there was real ammo available on the set, and if he was firing a firearm at target practice, it was dummies, he wouldn't be hitting any targets. So he might have more knowledge that there could have been an accident. I'm sure the state will probably look that up and see if they can produce a witness to prove that, because that would be relevant to the case.
Want to point out as well, my namesake, Joel Souza, the director of the movie, he was also injured in this shooting. The prosecutors made it clear he's not going to be charged, even though he was the director. He was, in fact, a victim in all this. The cause of death is listed as a gunshot wound of chest. That is to Helena Hutchins. And the manner of death as an accident. This comment, back to Gemma Gitta, she says that she was part of IATSE. It seems like she was actually working on this movie. And Gemma, if you were, I'd love for you to reach out to me at survivingthesurvivor@gmail.com. I'd be interested in speaking to you. But Nicholas, to you, she writes, Dave Halls was the first assistant director. How will his information regarding set safety and or lack thereof have on the overall case? He will have emails, text messages of all of this.
I don't think that Halls is going to have the effect as far as emails and text messages. There's been a lot of warrants. This information has been collected. They have it. But Dave Halls being the first one to plead guilty, to have a plea agreement, I think that we could expect something to come out from him, whether it be some type of cooperation, some type of other evidence that hasn't been disclosed, or testimony. The first one who falls is usually the cooperator of the group. So.
And Dr. Pearson, just to clarify, because this kind of goes along what we were just talking about, this comment here from Ann Waters, it's not a weak case. The FBI said the gun could not be fired unless the trigger was pulled. The buffoon Baldwin pulled the trigger and is guilty and should go to prison, whether he wants to or not. If you want to respond to that and correct any factual errors that there might be on the part of Ann Waters.
Well, I read the report. I read all of the report, and they were very clear that they could not complete testing. So that's going to have a factor. You have to look at what the standard of care was. And in this situation, we're looking at what was the standard of care with a gun. on, and I'll concede to Tim on this for the sake of argument, is that what is the standard of care for a gun that is being used as a prop in this particular circumstance, as a weapon that's not designed to be real, not designed to be a weapon of self-defense. There was no information to suggest that anyone was doing target shooting with live ammunition. In fact, investigators had found no evidence of that. There's been a lot of rumor on some gossip sites, but that's about it. And so what was the standard of care? And did he breach that standard of care? And that's really what we're looking at. Just because a person died and it was a terrible, horrific accident doesn't necessarily mean that somebody should go to jail or prison.
Which leads me right into this. It's a perfect segue from the prosecutor in this case, who says that there's basically no free pass for an actor. Her name, she's New Mexico's first judicial district attorney, Mary Carmack. Am I pronouncing this right, Nicholas? If you know her, Altwies, do you know?
Outwise, yeah.
Outwise. Every person, she writes or says, every person that handles a gun has a duty to make sure that if they're going to handle that gun pointed at someone and pull the trigger, that it is not going to fire a projectile and kill someone. She added, an actor does not get a free pass just because they're an actor. That is what is so important. We are saying here in New Mexico that everyone is equal under the law. Tim, if you go back to your days as a federal prosecutor and you put on your prosecutorial hat, would you jump on this? Would you follow the words of wisdom being presented here by the district attorney, Mary Carmack Altwies?
Well, there's a lot of questions that I had. And one was, I don't know if the facts have come out. Was he supposed to point and shoot the gun at another actor? Or did he just handle the gun, and was he pointing it at the cinematographer as a joke and it went off and she was killed? Those are factors I'd want to know. I'd want to know, of course, if there was target practice. Because I think everybody's saying it's a fake gun. It's not a fake gun because it actually killed somebody. So it was a real gun, and the purpose was not to obviously dispel a projectile, but it did. And I guess what responsibility did Mr. Baldwin had when he had a firearm that's a live firearm, and whether he pointed it or didn't point it, did he pull the trigger? And that kind of gun, apparently you have to cock the hammer back before you can fire it. So it looks like he had to have 2 steps taken before that firearm was discharged. And I'm not saying that I haven't read the FBI report, but I guarantee you they're going to have an FBI person come in and talk about that gun. They're going to talk about the stress and what it takes to pull that hammer. They're going to talk about how you have to cock the hammer for it to fire. Because if you do it in a half cock, which they have a half cock, you can't fire the weapon. That's just to round the cylinder around so you can check and see if you have ammunition. They're going to have an expert. I think you had a terrible accident. Someone was killed. I think that Baldwin's notoriety can go both ways. You're going to have people on that jury that may not like Alec Baldwin. You're going to have people that like Alec Baldwin. So I think they certainly have a case they can bring, because under New Mexico law, it's ordinary. You don't have to prove intent. It's ordinary negligence. You don't have to prove he intended to shoot her or he intended to kill her. That's not what they have to prove.
Nicholas, to you, Le Petit Wazoo writes, Alec Baldwin, 1, had finger on the trigger, 2, was member of management team responsible for safety overall. Which is more important in this lawsuit? I guess they're talking about the civil lawsuit.
I think to start is, first, we don't really know that Alec Baldwin was a member of the management team responsible for safety, right? Just because an actor is given this title of executive producer doesn't mean that this was the individual who was in charge of safety and who had all of the information and the power to manage the safety protocols at the set. But I think what's actually more important than both of these things is that the first AD told Alec Baldwin that the gun didn't have live ammunition in it, that it was a cold gun. And, there's there's a certain amount of trust, in my view, that goes with this. In a set, we have many layers of things. You have the armorer, you have the first AD, and by the time it's being handed to you and you're being told that there's not live ammunition in that firearm, I think that's the most important fact that's come out publicly right now, is that when he raised that firearm, which from what I understand from public information, that was part of the rehearsal, was supposed to be a close shot of him raising the firearm. That when he raised this firearm and was told there was no live ammunition in it, he relied on that and should have been able to rely on that information. That to me doesn't raise up to negligence, to criminal negligence in this case.
Dr. Pearson, there are photos of him with his finger on the actual trigger. The state will probably say, look, his finger was on the trigger, but is it your understanding or interpretation that means it doesn't necessarily mean that he pulled the trigger at the time of the accident? Is that the distinction?
I think that well, I think there's two issues. One, even if he did, and I don't know if he did or not, he's saying that he didn't. What was the standard of care? What did he know at the time? What did he believe was happening at the time? If the standard, and I know that it is, that there's somebody who hands you a gun and announces whether it's a cold gun or not, if it's a cold gun, then you have to be able to rely on that person and what they're saying. It's a standard of care in every movie that he's been in. He took gun training. He took weapons handling training. He actually asked who the armor was going to be, and he didn't know who it was, so he wasn't responsible for the staff. And so when he picked up that weapon and he was rehearsing, what did he understand and what did he believe and what information did he rely on, and was that reasonable under the circumstances? And that's really what we're looking at. It's not whether his finger was on the trigger or not. His finger may have been on the trigger. His finger may have pulled the trigger. He may have believed that there was no bullet in there that would kill someone. And he has to be able to rely on the people around him. People tell you where to stand. They tell you where to sit. They tell you what to wear. They tell you what makeup to wear. They tell you what your lines are. You have to be able to rely on the people that are supporting you. And so I think that really the armorer here is the one that should be left with responsibility for not providing safety on that set. There were 5 rounds of live ammunition found among the ammunition on the prop table. I question how that got there. There was a whole lot of stuff going on. It wasn't just about safety. It was about traveling distances. It was about what hotel they were staying at. It was about paychecks. And so and people walked off the set. And so I'm very curious about how all that's going to play into it.
My understanding was that he skipped the firearm training a week before. Alec did not do it. I mean, that's been reported in numerous sources that he skipped the firearm training. Is that not correct?
He had firearm training. That's my understanding. That's what I have read, is that he did ask for when it was, and he did have it. And I think he may have had it one-on-one. If there was a group training, it may have been that he couldn't make that schedule, but he did have it, according to everything that I've read.
Okay. Back to the prosecutor in this case. She went on to say that, in so many words, live rounds were mixed in, as Dr. Pearson just said, live rounds were mixed in with dummy rounds on the set, and crews were not checking ammunition regularly. And she's quoted as saying, there was such a lack of safety and safety standards on that set. There were live rounds on set. And just to couple that with this question here for you, Nicholas, Louise Rouleau writes, is it the responsibility of the actor or actress to check the gun before they use it on the set? I think Dr. Pearson was just implying that it's really the job of the armorer. This is a very unusual and kind of rare case. Do you know the answer to this question? And the fact that there seems to be a real issue of safety on the set, does that help or hurt Alec Baldwin's case?
So first, I think Louise is asking the most critical question in this case. Is the prosecutor going to be able to prove up that the standard and industry practices were that Alec Baldwin should have checked that firearm before using it on set. And there's been a lot of finger pointing about this. There's been statements from, different types of celebrities and actors about their practices and things that they do, but it doesn't seem to have a clear-cut answer to me just yet. And that's certainly the absolutely most important question that we have here. But I think that question gets a lot easier to answer the lower down the totem pole we go. Right, as we go to the first AD, as we go to the armorer, as we go to these people, there's no doubt that there's some type of duty there, and I haven't seen enough facts yet for me to have a true opinion on just how everything is happening there. Now, as far as, does Alec Baldwin have a responsibility for all of that? Again, I mean, I think that's something that we're going to have to see play out. I'm not comfortable saying that just because he's an executive producer, he has the responsibility for the safety, and that he knew about the safety problems. We also don't know, all the facts about the IATSE walk off, and what kind of safety issues and other types of issues there were. So to me, it's less about the gun, and it's more about these facts about the operations, and more about the facts of knowledge of what was going on.
So back to Gemma Gitta, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, and if not, I apologize. We cannot stress enough the importance of set safety in all caps. We lose too many IATSE crew members every year. Cold gun is not the term used on sets. Overall safety protocols were ignored for weeks. Again, Dr. Pearson, to you, if that is the case, does that help or hurt Alec Baldwin? And then I'll just put up a couple comments here. There's some comments streaming in about the fact that it was in fact a real gun. But does this, if there were all these set safety lapses, does that help or hurt Baldwin in this case?
Well, it depends on who's asserting that he was responsible for it. My understanding is that he wasn't responsible for hiring, he wasn't responsible for safety, that was handled by other folks, and that was delineated in a contract. So that's important to understand. I think that it's debatable whether cold gun is used on the set, because my understanding is that is in fact a term that is used in the industry, based on everything that I've read and everything that I've seen. Now, I could be wrong about that. I'm not a member of the union. I think one of the things that this is going to do, and I agree that set safety is very, very important, and I think that nobody should die in the course of making a movie. But what I'm going to tell you is that this set has been used for 60 years to make movies, and if you're going to charge an actor in the course of their duties of performing and rehearsing, I can tell you that that's going to cause problems in the industry, and that people aren't going to want to come to New Mexico. They're not going to want to use that place. They're going to have difficulty getting insurance. That people are not going to want to shoot there if that's what is going to happen if there's an accident on the set, because Lord knows there's a lot of accidents on the set for a lot of different reasons. And if people are going to be charged with crimes as a result of that in New Mexico, they'll be going to other states.
So Kara Leslie writes, a prop gun is a gun. Did anyone do research before coming on the panel? They all did their research. If anything, I didn't do my research because my 3 kids were driving me crazy, and I've done 5 million shows in the last week. But this one from Gemma, again, this was not a prop gun.
Nope.
And then from back to Kara Leslie, it was a replica of an antique Colt 45. It was a real gun. OMG. Tim is shaking his head. Yes. Tim, from the get-go, you said it was a real gun. I mean, it was a prop gun in the sense it was being used.
It is a real gun. It's not a fake gun. It's not a rubber gun. I've had defenses where the police could not prove my guy was holding a real gun because they make replica plastic guns. This was a real gun. And I think it is important. And I think this is going to be a watershed case, because I think actors are going to be responsible if they get a gun in their hands, that they have a due care. And I think when you go back, I'm curious what this first assistant director, what he's going to testify to. They cut him a deal. So is he going to say, I told him I gave him a cold gun? Or is he going to say, we had numerous problems with safety, and I tried to rely on this new girl. We didn't have money. We couldn't afford to get someone good. People were leaving. I trusted her. She told me it was good. I gave it to him. I probably could have done more. I probably should have checked it, and probably he should have checked it. Now, if there was safety concerns and he wasn't just a producer because of his name or putting some money up, and he was responsible for safety and he knew about this, this might be why the prosecutor is going forward. They feel they have a strong circumstantial evidence that he ignored safety. He ignored the problems. He recklessly handled a gun and he pulled the trigger and it killed somebody. And that would be enough to go forward. Now, whether a jury is going to convict him, that's a different story.
Nicholas, leading into that, Fairy Princess writes, I do not understand how a prop gun becomes capable of killing. That would be my question. Dr. Pearson basically said it's a matter of semantics. I think we can now all agree it was being used as a prop, but was a real gun. Do you agree with Tim that this could be a watershed case that really changes and redefines the way Hollywood uses weapons on sets, or what are supposed to be props?
I think that this event certainly needs to be a watershed event. The safety protocols on sets need to be examined. The way that we use firearms on set needs to be examined. What happens, in these situations needs to be reviewed. I'm not as confident that this is going to be a watershed case when it comes to criminal liability. Right. I mean, even though we are dealing with negligence, I will say that the criminal negligence in New Mexico is a higher standard than civil negligence. It's in between. Right. And what we're dealing with is more than just, was some duty breached, but was there some type of criminal element to this? And I think that the understanding that, whether or not Alec Baldwin knew that there was live ammunition on the set is going to be the most important fact of this case. And it's not a surprise that the first AD is the person with the plea deal, right? Because that's the key information, is what did he know? Because that's what it's all going to come down to.
Interesting. Very interesting. Back to our friend Carmack Altweiss, the prosecutor in the state of New Mexico. She went on to say, just because it's an accident doesn't mean that it's not criminal. Our involuntary manslaughter statute covers unintentional killings. Unintentional, that means they didn't mean to do it. They didn't have the intent to kill, but it happened anyway, and it happened because of more than mere negligence. They didn't exercise due caution or circumspection, and that's what happened here. Dr. Pearson, if that is in fact the definition, does this meet that burden? And does this go to trial in your estimation?
Whether, I think that there's a lot of questions in there. When it comes, and that's okay. They're great questions. I think that the first issue is, what is the standard of care? What is the custom and standard in the circumstance that you're talking about? Remember, this is not somebody in a house with a gun that's not locked up. There's live ammunition in the gun, and they've left it out, and they failed to put it in the gun cabinet, or they have left the gun cabinet unlocked. That's not this situation. So take that right off the table. What this is what is the standard within the film industry in that circumstance? And that's why I think that this case, frankly, is really weak, in that they can't apply normal standards to, like what I just described, to this situation. You have to go to what he knew. What did he believe was going to happen? What was his intent? And you have to look at, what did he know at the time? I hand you a weapon. I'll call it a weapon. He hands you a weapon that you believe has blanks and it's not going to kill somebody. And that's the purpose of that weapon at that time, because you're on a set and you're acting as an actor, and you're not responsible for the safety, because even though you have the title executive producer, that means something very different on film sets. It can mean anything. There's a series of definitions. And based on documents and letters and emails that I've read, he was not responsible for safety. And you hand that weapon to that person, and you represent that weapon doesn't have live ammunition in it. what was there negligence on your part? Or if I got to shoot a scene, and I hate the word shoot now because that I have to now take the gun and I got to take out all the bullets. I got to make sure I have to know the difference between what they look like, right? Got to make sure that it won't do that. I think that's utterly ridiculous under the circumstances. You have to be able to look at the circumstances, the culture in which this was done, in essence. And that's where I'm sitting on this.
So, Dr. Pearson, if I read you correctly, it's a full context of the scene or set, if you will. Patricia Burns writes, and I picked this comment for a reason. If he had not said publicly that he felt no guilt for the death of Helena Hutchins, I could have given him the benefit of the doubt. Tim, you're a seasoned criminal defense attorney. This happened, and the next thing you know, Alec Baldwin is doing an interview on ABC News with George Stephanopoulos. If you're his defense attorney, would you ever have let him gone on one of those shows to speak publicly ahead of what is happening to him now?
Never. But it always happens with high-profile people in the community, actors. You get doctors, business people who have and politicians are the worst. They always feel like they can go out there and they can talk themselves out because of their great reputation that they're never going to be charged. And they hamstring their lawyer. They give out facts now that you maybe not be able to put your client on the stand. You don't have all the facts. He might say something that's contrary to the facts. So it really hurts his case. They just believe that they know what they're doing. And, it's like me telling an actor how to play a part. I wouldn't tell him. He shouldn't tell his lawyer and hamstring him by going out there saying things that are crucial to a defense. And I think you're going to see people like this person responded. He showed me you can never deny it enough. You can never say I'm sorry enough to these people. These people are going to form an opinion. And that person or a relative might end up on your jury.
And to that point, Nicholas, I mean, how important is, obviously there's potentially a court trial here, but the court of public opinion. There's a lot of people who don't like Alec Baldwin. I got to tell you, for full disclosure, when I was an investigative reporter at Fox 5 in New York City, in your old neck of the woods and mine, Nicholas, I had to chase him down a couple times after he smacked a few people around, and he wasn't the nicest human being on planet Earth. I can tell you that. So, I mean, I personally immediately had a reaction when I heard this news, and didn't necessarily, for full disclosure, give him the benefit of the doubt. But how important is the court of public opinion?
It's important here. We have Santa Fe is a small community. The other county that is in this judicial district is Rio Arriba County. There's a single newspaper. It's not like in New York City where you have options. We have monopoly papers here. We have monopoly television here. And, what gets said in the press and ends up being critically important. As defense lawyers here, we have to deal with the press. We have to give statements. Otherwise we get, we get destroyed. But I think that it's going to be a difficult, if this gets to a jury, what makes it difficult is that Rio Arriba County part. Santa Fe is a much wealthier county. There are a lot of celebrities who spend summers there. There's a lot of high profile people there. But Rio Arriba County, which is most of the judicial district, is one of the poorest counties in New Mexico. Mm-hmm. And you're going to have working men and women, who are low income earners, who are going to look at him, sitting on the stand and sitting at the table in a small courtroom with a big team, trying to get an understanding of who this man is. In that situation, and that's tough for that jury pool. I wouldn't want to try this case with a mostly Rio Arriba County jury because you really have to question, can I put him on the stand?
Well, if Alec Baldwin was smart, he would hire Nicholas Hart and just go in, just the two of you guys. Kilo, who's a friend of the show, who yelled at me about something unrelated, which we won't get into, now writes, during his police interview, he stated, I shot the gun. Dr. Pearson, just back to what we were just talking about, the fact that Alec Baldwin spoke to George Stephanopoulos on this major network news program. I mean, obviously he had to speak to police. But but will his words come back to bite him in the behind?
I don't know. It depends on how they're used. There's a bunch of things that come into play here. First of all, of course, a bullet left a gun and entered someone's body and killed them. So clearly something happened. He did something that caused that to happen. Secondly, he can, and to go back to another comment that I saw fly across the screen, he can feel guilt over what happened. He certainly played a part in it. It doesn't mean it should result in criminal liability. You can feel guilt for having done something. So we got to be careful about word choice and what we are going to choose to attribute that to based on our own implicit biases. Going back to the issue of celebrity and whether it's going to bite him, you know, celebrities just don't get on TV and do interviews with George Stephanopoulos. I've actually gone to a sort of a little training with him, and they don't get on TV just cold. Okay, there's publicity people, they're lawyers, they're rehearsing with him behind the scenes, and anything that he said was most likely vetted carefully. He wasn't just going to get on TV and just chat. So to the extent that we're going to place blame on the actor, we're also going to place blame on the entire team involved. And so I think that of course, with any client that I ever had, I'd tell them to shut their mouth. Shut your mouth. Don't open it ever. And in this situation, they don't. And that can sometimes work to your favor and it sometimes can't. I will give you 2 words: Johnny Depp. Everybody swore up and down Johnny Depp wasn't going to win that case. He did. So, you know, you can take the actor out of Hollywood and toss them into another jurisdiction. And depending on how well they do and depending on how the case is presented and how the other side does in response to that, you can end up with a completely different outcome.
But I would make the argument, and I'm just nobody, that she helped him win the case. Let's put it that way. She was not a very a character that lent herself to getting a lot of support from the public. So I think that certainly helped. And I'm talking about Amber Heard. She certainly probably helped Alec Baldwin in that effort. But back to online handle.
Johnny was likable. Johnny was very likable.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Very down to earth. He gave answers that showed he had flaws. I don't think Mr. Baldwin's going to do that on the stand.
But Alec Baldwin hasn't had that opportunity yet on the stand. Johnny Depp came in as a wife beater. Okay, he came in as a wife beater, and everybody believed it. I agree. Amber Heard absolutely played a part in that, but there's a whole lot of characters in this movie here that are going to play a part in that too.
I think there are different dynamics when you're dealing with a homicide case, right? I mean, like the thing that Johnny Depp never had to overcome, the thing that most celebrities never have to overcome, is a tragic death. And it changes the dynamic inside a courtroom. A person testifying in their own defense and other witnesses testifying when someone has died is just a materially different situation. And I grew up with Alec Baldwin on TV and the podcasts and on the movies. And, I don't know if he's going to play well. But either way, it's an uphill climb if he has to testify in front of a skeptical jury who's going to look at this guy who says he's wealthy and he sounds funny, and I don't know if I could believe him.
I wouldn't put them on the jury.
But that goes to Nicholas's point about, and this is why I put this comment up here by Online Hangover. I think we can all agree that it was a horrific accident, yes, but him serving jail time would be a bit much. But Nicholas, you're talking about that county you just mentioned, very low income. They might not think it's a bit much, right?
Well, they don't, in the perfect world, the jury doesn't get to talk about punishment. They're instructed that, they don't get to consider punishment. But to me, I think that you're going to get a more skeptical eye, from a working person. This is also a state where firearms and guns are part of the culture. You're going to get people on that jury that own guns, that know how to use them, who collect firearms, and it's not you can't get rid of all of those people. You're going to be given, an hour or so here in New Mexico for jury selection. You only ask so many questions, and they're going to be bringing in a lot of people, because it's a high press and high publicity case. And, here they're going to have pretty significant obstacles to overcome with the jury. To me, I don't think that this case should have been charged with what's been released. And if there's going to have to be some really critical things that have been kept out of the public to convince me otherwise. But whether something should be charged and whether you could win a jury trial, are two very different things. You put 12 strangers in a room and ask them to make a decision, and that's completely out of your hands for what they're going to do.
If you just in a sentence or so, why do you think it should not have been charged?
I don't think there's there's been no evidence publicly that he knew that firearm had a live round in it. And to me, that's the most critical fact. Now, so that's it in a sentence. What I would look for is what we've been talking about here. Was he engaging in target practice? Was there live ammunition around? What exactly were the safety violations? Broad statements about safety issues. There's all type of different safety issues, that come on movie sets. Were they related to the firearms? All of this information is going to be critical to put this in context. But right now, in one sentence, you stand up and you say to the jury, he didn't know.
That's powerful. You just got me, Nicholas. So back to this FBI report. I did do my homework. An FBI forensic report said the weapon could not be fired during FBI testing of its normal functioning without pulling the trigger while the gun was cocked. In other words, you had to pull the trigger. The report also noted the gun eventually malfunctioned during testing after internal parts fractured, which caused the gun to go off in the cocked position without pulling the trigger. The prop gun was being held by Baldwin, who has maintained he did not pull the trigger. This part is the interesting part, Tim, I think. The report notes the gun eventually malfunctioned during testing after internal parts fractured, which caused the gun to go off in the cocked position. If you're the defense attorney, and you are you jumping on those bunch of words right there, caused the gun to go off in the cocked position?
Oh, absolutely. That you're going to turn that report into your report. You're going to try to convince the prosecutor that, hey, listen, your own FBI can't testify that gun couldn't have malfunctioned just like it did when the FBI tested it. And that's why his lawyers probably should go see if they can work out a deal, some kind of resolution, plead to a lesser charge, no jail, which would be smart. I mean, you have to do that as a lawyer. You have to at least talk to the prosecutor, see if you can resolve this case favorably without having to take a chance with 12 jurors who some may have an agenda, some don't want to be there, some may want to be on there because, as you know, you get on this case, you can possibly have a book, you're going to get interviews, you can make money. So a lot of the persons that want to get on this jury are going to have an agenda. Some will be good, some will be bad. It's really hard if he says you only get an hour in jury selection. It's impossible to ferret out the bad ones from the good ones.
That is also a very interesting point. Money to be made could sway jurors. This one from Kara Leslie. They're talking back and forth in the chat area. There's no video of the shooting. That was rehearsal footage before the incident. So there is a video of him with the finger on the trigger. But again, as Kara points out, that is not from the actual incident as far as we know. Dr. Pearson, this one I'll throw to you from LK. Why is this not a civil case if negligence or extreme recklessness is being alleged?
Well, there was a civil case, and it was settled between Baldwin and Hutchins' family. And so here, there are two kinds of in a sense, two kinds of liability. There's a civil process where you are alleging that you are owed damages because of someone else's conduct. In a criminal case, we're talking about whether there's been a crime against the people of New Mexico, in essence. Historically, when there was a crime, it was against the king because we were all his subjects. We got the king out of here. And then it became a crime against the people because we're a government of and by the people. So that is why this case is considered to be a criminal case and being brought.
They interviewed, and I don't know if you know this person, Nicholas, because you're there, University of New Mexico law professor Joshua Kassenberg. And he in a news story said, I'll say this, it is really hard to prove a case like this. Another defense attorney said there is no way this jury is not going to lay some kind of responsibility on the state. Wait a minute, you want me to lay responsibility on actor Baldwin, but you can't even tell me how the live round got there, because they don't know how the live round got there. This is coming from Albuquerque-based criminal defense attorney Ahmed Assed. I don't know if you know him. But Nicholas, to you, does the state, in prosecuting this case, really have to know how the live round got there, or does it not matter that much, in your opinion?
To me, the main facts for the state are knowledge. All the rumors that have been seeping out, what exactly was going on at that set. We know we have an inexperienced armorer, but we know we have a much more experienced first AD. But if there's target practice, if there was no weapons training, if there are industry standards that weren't followed, all of this changes the aspects of the case. But I agree with Professor Kassenberg, and I agree with Ahmad, right? This is a tough case to make out. We don't have a lot of involuntary manslaughter cases here in New Mexico. So if they're going to push through to trial, there's going to be a lot of litigation over what exactly is criminal negligence, what is involuntary manslaughter, do these facts, fit into this case. And Alec Baldwin's going to have a great team of lawyers. We're going to have no problem filing those motions and pushing those issues. And that's a lot to do before you ever even get to a trial.
And Gemma came back on to let us know she was not working on this movie, but does have 30 years in IATSE, working in the U.S. and around the world. And she went on to comment and say that it is shocking, all caps, the director is in charge too. Dr. Pearson, if Alec Baldwin's being charged, and even though the director is a victim in the sense that he was shot, do you believe, Dr. Pearson, that he also shoulders some of the brunt of this responsibility?
I think that it's probably distasteful for prosecutors to charge people who have experienced an injury in a situation like this. Not having been a prosecutor myself, I'll defer to Tim on that. But I think that if we're going to go the route of Alec Baldwin was an executive producer, there were a bunch of people that were listed on the call sheet that day. So there was Matt Del Piano, there was Ryan Smith, there was Angel Nigam, there was Nathan Klinger, there was Ryan Winterstern. So why aren't they charged?
Good question. Good question. This comes from an NBC legal analyst who I happen to know, a guy named Danny Ceballos, and he says, if I'm arguing in closing, I say, and I quote here, members of the jury, the DA doesn't even know how this gun accidentally became a dangerous gun, as sort of a mic drop moment. Tim, is that a good enough closing for the defense to just walk away?
My concern would be, you have the Screen Actors Guild common thing where those people give them the gun and it's a cold gun, or it's safe. Then you have the people that live there who handle guns that in the back of their mind going to say, if you have a loaded handgun, you are responsible. If you do something, you don't check it, you better damn well make sure that's not loaded with ammunition. And which ones are that jury going to, you have to somehow make sure that they don't pick the one with the firearm. If you start saying, well, the Screen Actors Guild, they're supposed to do that. If I'm the prosecutor, I'm going to say, hey, he had a loaded firearm. What duty do you have if you have a loaded firearm in your hand? Should you make sure it fires and kills somebody? Absolutely. And then they go back and say all the troubles they had on the scene, which to help buttress their case. But I wouldn't say that. Just because they don't know how it got there doesn't mean that he may not have violated the standard to be charged. I mean, it's a terrible case, because what if the director wanted to kill an actor and he changed the bullets, put in live bullets, tells the actor it's a cold gun. He shoots the gun, and it kills somebody, and clearly, would you hold Mr. Baldwin responsible for the acts, independent acts of another person? Probably not. But we don't know if that's the case. We're going to see when he testifies for the state what he's got to say.
Nicholas, I'm going to put you on the spot here, and you don't know the answer, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. I mean, does your gut tell you that something nefarious was going on here, Nicholas, that someone may have intentionally put some live rounds in there?
No. I mean, I think that criminal defense lawyers always hope that there's something like that out there, but it never happens. Look, I'm going to say, look, I'm the son of a union organizer. You know, I understand workplace safety. There needs to be a reckoning in this industry, right? Like, this should have never happened. And that has to be the place where we all start. But that doesn't mean that people should be going to prison for what happened on that set. And until we get to that point, nefarious or not, where there are facts that there was knowledge that something like this was possible and could have happened, you know, then we're in the wrong forum, you know, to deal with this. We shouldn't be in the criminal courts, you know, to deal with these issues.
I get a problem with the criminal system being the system we're going to use to try to have a reckoning in the industry. That's a civil matter. Whether somebody should go to jail or prison, okay, whether we're going to take someone's liberty away from them is not the place where we have a reckoning for an industry. This is about the conduct of one person and potentially the conduct of others. I just want to jump in on this because there was about 4 or 5 bullets found on that prop table. And the union folks walked off. Now, I love unions, so nobody jump on me about that. Okay, but they were pissed and they were really, really angry. And I can't say that I can completely block out of my mind, and I'm not even in the business anymore of defending folks. I can't even say that I wouldn't block out of my mind the possibility that somebody said, "Oh, I'm gonna fix your wagon," and toss some bullets there. I can't say that that isn't a possibility.
Patricia Burns, that's fair, I think. Patricia Burns writes, he said he felt no guilt, but this incident of killing a woman will be part of AB's history forever. Back to you, Dr. Pearson. Is that enough of a punishment? I know if I accidentally killed someone, I'd be tortured by it. He doesn't seem quite as bothered. When I first heard this, I was like, whoa, I can't believe that this happened, and he's going to have to live with it. Is that not enough of a penalty, or does the criminal justice system need to play out?
I think that he did feel guilt. He did feel terrible. He felt awful. My recollection of what had transpired at the time. In fact, there's pictures of him when he gets notified of what happened. I think that it absolutely could be sufficient for him. Again, you know, I can come up with 1,000 different examples of when somebody accidentally kills someone, and it wasn't necessarily a criminal act. You know, think of your car. Think of slamming into someone's car accidentally, and whether you should be, you know, should go to prison or jail for 18 months. And think about circumstances in which that isn't the case. Everybody who drives and owns a vehicle has a deadly weapon in their yard, right? So what is the standard that we're talking about when this happens, and what does he have to breach for that to happen, for him to go to jail? So I do think he was impacted. I think that he was friends with these folks, if I recall correctly. So I think that, you know, he obviously has to live with it. It's obviously in his background. It's never going to change. It's never going to go away. Put him in prison, never going to change.
Kara Leslie writes, and we'll do a couple more comments, get some closing remarks, and we'll wind it up. But Kara Leslie writes, rumor is Alec tried to delete text messages about the safety issues, probably why he didn't want to give up his phone. Tim, if that's the case, will they be able to retrieve those messages and use that in a court of law?
If they could get his phone and get those issues, but apparently he was trying to work out turning over his phone. He didn't do it. I think if they got his phone, they would be able to tell if he deleted them, because FBI is more they're a lot better getting things that you think you delete. I think if he did try to delete those messages about safety issues, I think that could be a smoking gun, because then he had knowledge that there
Pun
was
intended.
safety issues.
Pun intended.
Right. And that would make a big hurdle for him.
Yeah.
Because if he starts obstructing justice, obstructing an investigation, then they're going to introduce that. They may file charges of obstruction. Now they're going to get his reputation and for truthfulness bad. And a good prosecutor would do all they can to make the person look bad, file all the charges they can. Obstruction, that's a great one. He tried to obstruct our investigation because he knew there were safety issues. He wouldn't give our phone. We found out later he deleted all these text messages. That could be very damaging.
I pulled this comment up from Raymond Rose because I think this is a lot the way a lot of people think of him. Alec Baldwin is slimy, slippery bully. And then Patricia Burns goes on and says, Baldwin knows that pulling the trigger would make him culpable, so he denied it from the outset. Nicholas, do you buy that? I mean, he's obviously a very smart guy, successful. Was this some sort of legal wrangling and angling from the get-go?
I don't know. I could say, though, that the smartest people make the worst, witnesses, make the worst people in interrogations. You can't outsmart everybody. And the average person is a lot more emotionally and socially smart than, people realize. And, for lack of a better phrase, people have good bullshit meters, whether or not you're a celebrity or a genius. So, I mean, there's going to be a lot to see. I just want to say I agree. Like, if he deleted text messages, even if they can't retrieve the text messages, that's a devastating fact, to have to overcome. Someone jumping up and down, getting to say to the jury, you get to assume that what he deleted, was bad for him, right? They're going to try to make that argument. And that's not going to look good for someone who's out of town and, does have a kind of a reputation of being slimy and a bully.
And Nicholas, I'm going to send this right back to you because it has to do with the state of New Mexico. This was a legal analyst being asked about the state bringing charges. And this person says, I could see it as a shot across the bow by the prosecution that gives the defense an opportunity to try to negotiate a deal before charges are ever actually filed. Do you see it that way?
Yes. I mean, I think that there's very often communication behind the scenes. When you represent a high profile person that they may be going to a grand jury or they're going to be seeking charges, but to have a public press conference and, put your theory out there before any charges have been sought, they're shooting across the bow, whether it be for a deal or because they want to get out ahead of the other side.
And then this was interesting to me. This same person says they threw the book at Alec Baldwin. Not only is he facing an involuntary manslaughter charge, but they added another option, which would increase the sentence from up to 18 months to a 5-year mandatory sentence. So, Tim, that's a lot of jail time, especially if you're Alec Baldwin.
They do that. They charge you, hoping you'll come back and plead to the lesser. I would imagine his lawyers probably could plead to something was a suspended sentence to the lesser charge. And I think that's probably doable. And I think the family would be happy with that. I think the prosecutor would be happy with that. And that's probably what they should be trying to do right now. But I don't have all the facts, and I don't know if they had negotiations prior to this point. But for them to publicly come out the way they did, I agree. They wanted to get their message out first before the Baldwin PR team could get out there. Maybe Alec does another interview.
By the way, Tim, if you're his attorney right now, what are you saying to him?
I'm telling him that he's not making any more public announcements. He's not talking about it. Just tell him that your lawyer said you can't talk. Let me do the talking. I'll see what I can do. I'll get all the evidence. We'll try to prevent you from being charged. We'll prevent you from going to court. We'll waive your appearance. We can work this out. Don't worry about it. You're not going to go to jail. Just keep your mouth shut. Don't inflame the jury. Don't inflame anyone. Don't do an interview.
spoken like a true defense attorney. Roxanne A. writes, this isn't about Alec Baldwin. It's about who was in charge of the gun, the ammo, and who really bears responsibility, not Alec Baldwin. This could have been any actor or actress. Do you agree with that, Dr. Pearson?
I think that she's singing my tune. I think that this is about who's responsible for the weapon and for the ammunition, and for he's relying on what people are telling him, and he has to rely on these people on a movie set. He isn't. You aren't going to stop production to open up a gun to check. You're just not. That isn't what they do. And maybe some actors do, but that isn't the normal standard. And so what it is that what we want the standard to be? And are we not supposed to use weapons anymore on set and go with CGI? Is that what we're trying to push folks to do? And what does that do for the independent film industry? I think that this is going to produce a lot of big questions.
Jazzy Boop. I don't get it. How are people mad at Alec B? It's not like he set out to kill this lady. I'm trying to understand this internet lynching of him over an accident, all caps. Tim, if you're in your, delivering your closing arguments, is this part of what you are saying?
It all depends. I mean, when you do your closing, you have to have credibility. I can't go up there and say it's an accident if I find out that he deleted messages about safety and he knew about safety and he disregarded it and they wanted to do something. He said no, and he didn't do the training, and he was shooting on those make a big difference how you make your closing argument. But if none of that is true, then you're obviously going to say, listen, 2 people handled the gun before him. He was given the gun. He had no problems with this person. He's acting out of scene. The gun is malfunctioned. FBI is going to tell you it was a rickety gun. It went off. He feels terrible. It's a civil suit, not a criminal.
Dr. Tracy Pearson, JD, brings almost 2 decades of experience defending complex legal matters on behalf of litigants in state and federal court. She has appeared on every show imaginable, including that big bald guy who's a famous doctor, Dr. Phil. Every Tuesday, she's on John Fugelsang's Tell Me Everything on Sirius XM Progress 127. Dr. Pearson, your closing arguments here. Does this ever go to trial? Does Alec Baldwin ever face jail/prison time?
Oh, I love your questions, and I'm going to punt on them. I'm going to tell you that I never predict anything because juries are unpredictable. But what I will say is this. What this prosecutor is doing is created a big snare probably in New Mexico because of the politics around this. If Hollywood gets behind Alec Baldwin and says, we're not coming there to shoot films anymore, now they're going to lose income, they're going to lose opportunity, and they can put a whole lot of pressure on that prosecutor by banding together.
Our Timothy Jansen will be bigger than Alec Baldwin one day because he's on Surviving the Survivor all the time. I'm turning this guy into a star. He is the creme de la creme of criminal defense attorneys out of Tallahassee, also spending 5 years as a federal prosecutor. Tim, what is next for Alec Baldwin? What is going on behind the scenes?
Well, obviously, we want to see the charges. We want to see how they're charged. His lawyer's got to see what evidence, what kind of cooperation, what's this other witness who pled guilty, what he's going to testify to. So you go meet with the prosecutor and say, hey, why are we here? What do you have that overcome this? And maybe the prosecutor will tell you. If she wants a plea, she'll tell you. I don't think the industry is going to, I've never seen it where money changes hands and they make a decision. We're not going to charge him because we're afraid of getting money. I don't know this prosecutor. Maybe she fully believes what she's doing is right because she's got evidence that none of us are aware of. And that really makes her feel like she's compelled to come forward, that she's tried to get a deal with Alec's people. They're saying nothing. And so maybe that's why she's taken this step to charge him, knowing she's going to work out a resolution. That happens a lot in high profile cases, especially when someone's dead.
And Nicholas, to you, did I also, on top of being a phenomenal criminal defense attorney, as I can tell you are, did you go to Juilliard? Is that what I'm hearing?
I did. Before I was a lawyer, I was a musician, and I went to Juilliard and the Cincinnati Conservatory.
Well, and what was your instrument?
I played the bass.
Wow. For those of you who have been living under a rock, Juilliard is the Harvard of music schools. So that is impressive. Hailing from the great borough of Staten Island and now in New Mexico, Nicholas Hart reviewed pro se criminal appeals to determine if there was a case that the court should review. He worked for the Honorable Judge James E. Graves on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. He does it all in the state of New Mexico, where the movie Rust filmed, which is one of the reasons we have him on, and we hope to have him back on. To you, Nicholas, does this end up in front of a jury of 12?
It shouldn't. Whether it does, we're going to see what everyone's appetite is to push forward, but it shouldn't. If it should get resolved. It shouldn't go to a jury.
Thank you to one and all. A very interesting conversation. We're going to be doing it again, I am sure, as this is just the beginning of what could be a long year or more for the actor Alec Baldwin. Hopefully I do not get hate mail from him, or maybe I do. I don't know. We'll see. But
Alex, don't do that. Just don't do that, okay?
Yeah, please don't. But maybe you should. It'll help the show. But anyway, we will be back soon enough with another episode of Surviving the Survivor. Love you, America. Thank you all for tuning in. Love you, New Mexico. Love you, Staten Island. And love you, Tallahassee. And Dr. Pearson, where are you?
Los Angeles.
And love you, LA.